Welcome to the Brand Theory Podcast, the podcast for helping you uncover your passion, realize your purpose, and take the aligned action. Together, we're going to prove the theory that when we live our lives on brand, the possibilities become limitless. I'm your host, Shauna Armitage, branding expert and business coach. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Brand Theory Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down and speaking with Shauna Armitage, a marketing director for early stage startups, the host of the Startup Renegades podcast, a mama of four, and a fellow Coca-Cola obsessed entrepreneur. After struggling to find work in the alien economy of 2011, Shauna turned to freelance writing and quickly found there was a market for what she had to offer. She ended up finding so much work that she was offered a full-time position of director of digital content for an agency where she would spend a little bit of time before branching off on her own. Wanting to create a more effective marketing solution for startups than an agency model, Shauna began stepping into the fractional marketing director role. Through her intensive approach, Shauna has helped her clients achieve results such as 400% increase in website conversions and a 220% growth in sales. Welcome to the show, Shauna.
Thanks so much for having me.
That's like a little bit of a tongue twister, show Shauna.
Yeah.
So I know we heard a lot about you in your intro, but I always like to ask in your own words, tell us just a little bit more about yourself. Was entrepreneurship always something that you wanted for yourself? Kind of just bring us up to date of how you got to where you are now.
I love that question because I feel like so many people answer it like they were always an entrepreneur. Like They sold lemonade as a kid. And
that's actually a very common story, the lemonade story.
A lot of people have that story, and it could not be any more different than what my story is. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I'm definitely an entrepreneur by accident. I don't think I even knew that that was an option. When I grew up in a small town in Maine, I always wanted to be a teacher. I thought the jobs were like teacher, cashier at the grocery store, firefighter. Like that was kind of my ecosystem. And I definitely pursued being a teacher. I hated the idea of the testing. And I failed one of my tests and was discouraged and never went back. And that's not the entrepreneurial spirit at all, right? So I graduated in 3 years. I got my degree in history with a minor in education, and then decided I wasn't going to be a teacher. And the degree in history wasn't doing anything for me. So I ended up getting married, having my first kid, and then I went back to school for professional writing. And I thought, okay, this is something I'm good at, and I can apply it all over the place. You know, I can do it for communications, there's PR, there's writing for business. Websites were big at that point. And when I graduated in 2011, the economy was down, and I couldn't even get anyone to look at my resume. So somebody in the family suggested I try virtual assisting, and that took off immediately. And as I started picking up these writing jobs that were for marketers, you know, writing sales pages, emails, blogs, I realized that there was kind of a bigger picture to this writing thing that I was doing. Again, I didn't know that marketing as a career existed. So I got my HubSpot certification, and I started working full-time remotely for this marketing firm that I had met through, it was Elance. It's Upwork these days. Elance doesn't exist anymore. And that's really where I fell in love with marketing. And I did some jobs for a few years until a friend of mine asked me to be the number 2 in his marketing agency. I was so excited. This was going to be my forever job. And within 6 months, it fell apart. I loved the work. I loved the clients. But the way that he was going about doing it didn't have a lot of integrity. It was all about signing the next client and not about actually delivering the deliverables. So when I pushed back on that, I got fired. And I did. I woke up one morning. I didn't have access to any of my stuff. My email was shut down. All my client stuff was gone. And he called me two hours later, and he said, sorry, you're not a culture fit anymore. And this was 3 weeks before my husband was leaving for a 6-month deployment. So I cried. I got that out of my system.
Wow.
That was a Friday morning. And by the next Monday morning, I had registered an LLC and I decided that I was going to do it my way. And that's when I became a fractional marketing director.
That is some story. Sometimes it takes those like little bit of dramatic instances to be like, okay, that's it. Now's the time. There's no better time now than to start the LLC and just get going. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us.
It's so true.
I feel like, and now this thought came to me, and I don't know if you agree, but something that you're talking about in the 2011 when you couldn't get people to look at your resume, but then you went online, it was like this whole new world to you. I almost feel like that's going on today a little bit, where it's not necessarily, we're not seeing such a big dramatic crash. I don't know if we will, but we'll see. But there's so many entrepreneurs all over the world who are now, or business owners, I should say, who are now turning to the online world, turning to VAs and these other companies who function online, who have been functioning online for years because they don't know how to do it.
I think that you have such an opportunity to present yourself differently online. Yeah, I'll be the first one to say that I'm not a good resume writer. I'm not sexy on paper, but when people, read my articles or check out how I describe my work on my website, that resonates with people. As soon as they get on a phone call with me, they know how passionate I am about what I do, and my expertise really shines through. So it's really an opportunity to present yourself in a different way that I feel like we didn't have 5-10 years ago.
Totally. It helps us build that like, trust, and know factor, as I call it, as I'm sure you've heard it called too, when we can show up online and showcase what we do, our skills, but also kind of share who we are behind that business. It just really helps that audience resonate with us as a human being. And like you were saying, once they get on the phone with you, that just is shining even further than what we can see online. So get online if you're not. Anyway, something that stuck out to me in your intro, and I'm sure it stuck out to everyone in the audience, is the fact that you helped your clients, and still do help your clients, achieve 400% increase in website conversation. Is that conversation or conversion? Am I reading that right?
Conversion.
Conversion, yeah.
If it's conversation, I need to go back to that one sheet and edit.
And 220% growth in sales. How? And is that with your relationship marketing method?
Yes. So for the conversions, is very simple, cleaning up some website UX, and filling in some holes that I think a lot of business owners don't realize that they have. So the first thing, some of those numbers came from when I was working for this big company, and they did websites for all of their clients, and they had this one PDF, this one ebook that was a lead generator. And immediately I said, nobody wants an ebook, right? This is like very dry subject matter. If you want them to book a consult call, you need to make it actionable. You need to make it relevant to them. And it was only one of the areas that they covered. So if that wasn't the area that was relevant to them, there's no reason for them to get that. I think too many times as business owners, we focus on what we want people to hear from us or what we think they need to hear from us, and don't focus on what's actually going to be valuable to them. And that's where the switch up came, is we created a new lead magnet that was much shorter. It was a checklist. It was like 2 pages long. And it was basically the intake form for the company. And that thing just got downloaded like crazy. It was at the top of the website instead of on like a sidebar, lower on the homepage. So making those simple UX changes, making sure that you have an offer that is valuable and super relevant to anyone that might hit your website, making sure that it's visible, and that it's a win-win. That's key when it comes to getting those conversions. And a lot of business owners just kind of slap those things up there, and they're like, well, we've checked off all the boxes, but they haven't really thought about the experience or the connection to the customer. That'll kill your conversions.
Yeah.
In terms of the 220% increase in sales, this was for a leather handbag company that I was working with at the time. I was working directly with their CMO, who was fabulous. And they were doing all of the digital marketing things, and they were doing it well. But one thing that they weren't doing was just creating that kind of direct connection with their audience. We did this a few years ago by starting Facebook Lives, where they were getting on and doing these really entertaining segments and engaging with their audience. And the more the audience engaged, the more and more viewership we got. And it just increased brand awareness in a huge, huge way.
Yeah. And it's so interesting that you say that, because it may be not Facebook Live today. Maybe it is, depending on your ideal audience, but video marketing and showing again, like that human behind your business is so, so important for these days. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, and it was true then and it's true now. And it's just, the times have changed and we may have to keep up with it, but what you're saying is going to stay the same, right? And it's just figuring out how to do it the right way for now and your goals for your business, but also, like you're saying, keeping that client in mind, keeping that audience in mind with those actual steps. I'd like to go back just a few steps when you're talking about making these small changes. You called them UX changes. Honestly, I don't know what that is. So I'm sure some people don't know what the term UX means. If you could just explain that, that'd be great.
That's going to be the user experience. So again, when we're building something like a website, we're thinking about just dumping everything on there that we think that they need to know.
Yeah.
But we're not necessarily thinking, but we should be thinking about what it looks like to somebody who has never come into contact with your company before.
Yeah.
So, what's the most eye-catching thing? Is that conversion event right above the fold? So before you start scrolling, is it all right there?
Yeah.
Is it kind of descending order of importance? Those kinds of things are really important to keep in mind. And a lot of business owners, again, are just focused on what they think the customer needs to know versus the things that are top of mind for the customer.
Okay, love that. Thank you so much. And then switching from user experience to then marketing, let's talk, we're on the theme of mistakes, so to speak. What are some of the biggest marketing mistakes that you see that before your clients start working with you that they're doing, or just of your observation of the online world?
Yeah, I think the biggest marketing mistake is the build it and they will come mindset, because founders know that what they've built is amazing and they know the pain points and they know how it serves people, but every market is saturated right now.
Yep.
So you're not going to just have people coming and finding what you do. So the idea that if you build a website, you start posting on social media, that people are going to find you, that's the biggest mistake. We have to be active in our marketing versus passive. Things like posting on social media or writing blog posts, there's nothing wrong with that. It all fits into a cohesive marketing strategy. But what are we doing to actually distribute that information? Especially when you're starting up, I work with early stage startups. So whether you're feeling like you fit into that category or you're starting up a small business, we have to get scrappy in the beginning in finding new ways and new avenues to get the word out. And I think that it ends up being a real mistake when business owners have that build it and they will come mindset, and they're kind of having that expectation, if they put it out there, if they kind of just check off all the marketing boxes, that they'll be able to start generating traffic or revenue, because you have to do more than that.
Yeah, I think I remember the day I launched my website 3.5 years ago. I had that moment of okay, well, how soon until I get that email that someone wants to build a website with me? Or how soon until I get that notification that someone wants to work with me? But you're so right. It takes action, and it takes that little bit of scrappiness, a little bit of experimenting in the beginning to figure out what works for you. And it's not necessarily a one size fit all, which kind of leads me into my next question of what it really takes to figure out the right marketing plan for your specific business.
Well, it takes testing, first of all. I think that a lot of people get frustrated when they do all of the usual things and it doesn't work. What's wrong? You really have to be willing to invest and to test. So whether you're investing money or you're just investing your time, you have to really be willing to put some energy towards doing things and to trying things differently. I think that is so important in the beginning.
Yeah. And do you think people should try all the things, or do you think they should try, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 things that when they're just starting out? So I feel like trying all the things may be overwhelming, but if that's something that you suggest, then let's talk about it.
I wouldn't suggest it. I think that we're on the same page there. Yeah, you don't want to try all of the things. And I think the biggest thing for me is trying different things.
Yeah.
I had someone who I consult with who was sure that she had to be on top of her email marketing after she admittedly told me that she only had 10 people on her list. So that's kind of backwards. Not that you shouldn't be, engaging people on your list, even if it's a small list,
Yeah.
but your energy should be on getting people onto the list before
Right.
you're so worried about, so you have to test out different strategies there first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely, I think my biggest advice there would be for founders to do some introspection about what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what resources do you have? Do you have team members that have certain strengths, fill in certain gaps? And what's your budget? Because if you have money to spend on ads, you can speed up that process. If you don't, then you need to look at more manual ways of hitting these marketing targets. And then do you do it yourself, or do you rely on someone on your team? So just really kind of figuring out what your available resources are. That's the first place to start, because someone who has a $2,000 a month budget can market a lot differently than someone who has no budget at all and needs to do all of the things themselves.
Yeah. And that kind of just reminds me of another point that I always like to make is you don't have to do everything by yourself, especially when you're first starting out. And I think as entrepreneurs, we kind of go into it thinking that we have to just figure it out for ourselves. Like we're just going to watch the YouTube video, read the blog, and that'll be it. And sometimes it works. But for someone who's out there like, oh, I just can't, I don't know the first thing about marketing. I don't know what I'm doing. That's why you as a service provider do what you do. Like I'm sure you've got some free stuff out there where people can start, but also if you have that budget to make an investment, that's such a valuable thing to be able to invest in, because not only is somebody like you going to say, okay, here's what you need to do, not the email marketing, we're going to focus this way. That's like a safety net almost of, okay, she's been through what I've been through, number one. And she's tested this not only on my business, on her business, she's tested it so many other ways. And she's actually going to take a look at my business and not just suggest blindly. She's going to suggest based on my specific services or products, my specific goals, my specific network, all of that. So basically what I'm trying to say is if you have the money to invest and you don't know the first thing about ads, you don't know the first thing about marketing, somebody like Shauna who has this service that she provides is a great first place investment, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think it's important. And I think when we don't have big budgets, we're scared to invest in someone else, or we have very little profit. We should be paying ourselves instead of going out and paying someone else. So admittedly, it's scary. I built my business slowly just for that reason. I took on a lot of the projects myself where I probably would have gone farther faster if I had invested back in my business by getting the kind of support that I needed to move forward.
Yeah. What's one of the first bigger investments that you made for your business? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was a course. It was a DIY course from Stacy Tushel, actually. And it was about doing launches. And you know what? I don't think I ever did that launch, but there was so much in there from organizational strategies or like promotion strategies. I loved doing the course and I just felt refreshed after doing it. So yeah, it wasn't like hiring somebody to help me, but I felt like it gave me a different perspective as a business owner. So it was mentorship in a way.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm sure you probably felt like you were going to throw up making that investment because of everything that you were saying before. It's like you feel guilty for spending this money on your business when you should be trying to pay yourself or supporting your family or a list of other things. But if you're feeling that, guys, and you're feeling that intuitive pull to make the investment or make the leap, it pays off, whether it's doing the course fully or, like Shauna was saying, in a different way.
Yeah, I think the next one that I definitely did was getting an assistant to help me with like social media and engagement, and things like that. So that was a smaller cost, but it was hard to give away that part of the business and be more hands off. But I think so in a way for me it was kind of the mentorship was the first piece, because as I said, I was an entrepreneur by accident. I didn't have a history of this. I didn't go to school for any of this. I was learning as I was going, and just being able to get insight from people who have been there before me was the most valuable thing for me in the beginning.
Yeah, love that. And I feel like yeah, as entrepreneurs, we may make an investment, we're like, probably shouldn't have done that or whatever. But I feel like with everything, there's something to learn from everything, from every investment, whether it turned out to be the best investment or an okay investment. There's always something to learn.
Yeah, totally.
So you have mentioned that you work more with startups, and you actually started a podcast kind of about that, Startup Renegades. Tell us a little bit more about what you talk about and kind of why you started the podcast in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. I started a podcast a few years ago, and it was kind of a flop, not for any like outward reason, but inward reason. You know, I wasn't getting great connections with the guests. It wasn't the right thing for me. Mm-hmm. So this year, amid the pandemic, and we had talked about this before we started recording, I'm in Germany right now because my husband's in the Air Force. Networking has become really difficult.
Yeah.
So being able to, as a service provider, I need to be in front of people. I need to be running in the same circles as the kind of people that I support. And startups are a little bit different than your average small business. There's different ecosystems for it. So I decided, the best thing that I can do is network. I can meet these people who are doing the damn thing, and then B, I can learn and I can share so much wisdom through a podcast for strategies that these people have used to grow their business, because that's why people come to me. And it's not that I don't have good experience, but like you said, there's always something to learn.
Right.
So just having these conversations about like, what was the strategy? What was the thing that was really successful for you that enabled you to scale your business the way you did? And that's something that I know all the people that work with me always want to hear.
Yeah, I think even too, I'm remembering back when I was literally just a baby entrepreneur, I wanted and I fed off of those stories of people who had created a successful business. And I was listening to it for everything, for the strategy part of it, to figure out how they did it, if they have a similar business, and also just like the inspiration part. So I love that you've created an entire podcast around that topic. I think it's so important for people for especially newbies who are starting out, for people to hear these stories over and over and over again for those days, especially when you're like, why am I doing this? Or I don't know about this, or can I do this? To have a resource to go to for inspiration and learning material. I think that's great.
Yeah, it inspires me every day talking to all of these founders. And one thing that I wanted to do was keep it a raw conversation. So we talk about their journey, and the goal is always to talk about what was that strategy that someone else can learn from and put into practice in their businesses. But I've had so many conversations where the founder was like, and that didn't work, and it was a complete failure, and I had to switch things up. And it's just this sense of anyone who's listening really realizes that they're not alone, that these people who they've seen that are at a higher level, that have the successful businesses, have had all of those challenges and found a way around them and eventually scaled their businesses. So there's so much to learn.
I love that. That's awesome. Do you publish a new episode every week?
Every Tuesday, yeah.
Awesome. Yay. Awesome. So guys, definitely go check that out for anybody new and anybody who just needs the reminder of that energy of what it was like to start your business, and like oh yeah, I went through that, or I remember that, and just take it as, look how far you've come. That's always something that I feel like we forget to do, is in those moments where the launch didn't pan out, or anything happens that we weren't necessarily planning on, but that's always a thing. We can't necessarily plan for everything. We forget how far we've come as entrepreneurs, whether that's 4 months or 4 years. There's a constant growth that you get into as an entrepreneur. So definitely go give it a listen. So you said something about the difference between the mindset in startup businesses and the ecosystem, something, your words are better than mine, with small business mindset. I'd love for you to get into that a little bit.
Okay. So this is the example I always give because I think it's one that people can really understand. When we think of startups, we think of Facebook, Uber, Dollar Shave Club, right? Like we're thinking of these companies that have angel investors or have worked with venture capitalists to raise a whole bunch of money. That's just that word, that's kind of what it evokes for people, right? They're raising $1 million, $5 million so they can dump a bunch of money into the business, hire talent, and scale quickly. Those are high growth startups. It's absolutely true. I do not work with those guys. So
in like the Google offices, sitting on bean bags around these like just slabs of wooden tables and stuff like that. That's just how I picture these tech startup and just startups in general.
Yeah, a lot of the companies that I work with are bootstrapping, so they're paying for it out of pocket, or they've got angel investors, so they're taking that to pay for marketing or to pay for tech help, so they can build that part of their business. But they're small businesses. So the best example that I have of this is a dance studio that I had talked to one time on a consult call. A dance studio is not a startup business. You are always going to be limited by your physical space. You can only fit so many people in there. You're going to be limited by your physical location, your city. There's only so many people in your target market in that area, right? You can't scale up operations on that. But what they decided is that they had a really unique kind of dance program, and they were going to bring it online. So now what was before was limited to one space is now on a subscription model where they're making these videos, once or twice a week, and they have a kind of one-to-many model that they can scale up. And that's really what I think of when I think of startups. So if you have that mindset that you're going to build something, that to me is the startup mindset versus the small business mindset, which is like, we have to pay the bills, we have to pay our staff, we've got to have enough money to cover these costs. But for startup, it's really about that scalability factor.
So do you work with one more than the other, or do you ever transition a small business mindset to a startup mindset?
I have, yeah. I'm working with a service-based business right now, but what they do, they can bring on consultants that go out and do the service, but it's a proprietary method. So that is scalable because that has so much growth potential rather than the founder being the only one who does the service. I work with SaaS companies. I have a micromobility company right now, e-commerce, CPG, a lot of things that, like, if you can sell it online, you probably have the ability to make it a scalable startup model.
I love that. So for somebody like you who's currently in Germany, do you have a lot of clients who are in the States? Like, do you have clients from everywhere?
I only have clients that are in the United States.
Are you up like at odd hours working on their accounts ever?
Yes, all the time. So, my husband's in the Air Force, which affords us a lot of opportunities, and I love it. And when we learned we were coming over here, we're super excited. We're going to go explore Europe with our 4 kids. Like, we get a free ticket.
4 kids? Okay, we need to talk about that next.
Yeah. I get that a lot. Like, 4? Really? What's wrong with you? But so there's a couple of reasons for me. I mean, I'm a US-based company, so that is a big part of it. But then on top of that, cultures are very different, demographics are very different. So trying to work with a company that's based out of Austin, that has a certain demographic. I know which parts of the US have that demographic,
Right.
or how to target them or how to talk to them, even language. You know, if you're working with a German company or even a British company, there's little turns of phrases that I'm not going to be familiar with. And it just will make me a less effective marketer, because you have to remember, I'm not just doing like a writing project for them, I'm the marketing director. So I have to understand the messaging, I have to understand who they're targeting and where they live and what their pain points are. And that's much easier to do for me because I grew up in the United States than it would be for me to do out in foreign countries.
Right. Okay. Got it. Okay. So you have 4 kids, and I didn't say that like you have 4 kids, like you're crazy. You look calm, cool, and collected. You look like you do not have 4 kids and the craziness
Thank
that
you.
comes along with 4 kids.
I'm pretty sure the mic is picking them up in the background a little bit right now, but no, I have a lot of support between my husband. We have an amazing babysitter, which allows me to work during the day, and then when I do my client calls, I do them at night after they've gone to bed. But yeah, we had 4. I got 1 boy and 3 little girls.
That's awesome. What are their age ranges?
My son is 11, and then my girls are 6, 4, and 2.
God bless you. That's awesome. Before I did this, I was the assistant director for a daycare. So I worked for, all the age groups up until the 5. I did work with school age kids a little bit, but they're just, they really do. They run your energy down. And I think when entrepreneurs, whenever I interview moms or parents on this, I'm just always curious about how they make it work, because it's something that I want to do eventually, right? Like do both, be the mom and the successful entrepreneur. So I'm always like, how do you do it? So I love that you said that you have the support and you just figured out, which I'm sure is like, that's again, something that you probably can't plan too much for, because kids have a mind of their own and they just kind of.
I think the biggest thing for me personally, I love my work. I'm really invested in my work, and I love being a mom. And from very early on, I realized that I couldn't do both at the same time. Some people can. Some people can be work from home parents. That wasn't me. So when I started my business, one of the scariest things that we did was, put the kids in daycare, because that took literally all of my income in the beginning.
Yeah.
But having them in daycare for me personally allowed me to separate it. So I wasn't trying to cook, or I wasn't trying to play a game with them while I was answering emails. So I can have it separate. So when I'm at work, I'm 100% focused on the work, on the clients. And then when I'm out of work, I'm 100% focused on the kids. So just having that separation has been a game changer for me personally.
Yeah. Love that. Okay, cool. So if you can do it, I can do it. Okay, cool. And then just kind of a last point I'd like to touch on here is I read something somewhere that we really, in your bio, that brand advocacy is really essential for brand growth. And I've actually never heard it written out like that or seen it written out like that. I understand what it means, but I would love for you to just kind of go on a little bit of a rant of what that means and why that is so important, because it is so true.
Of course, I'm happy to rant. Okay, so when we think about the way people make purchasing decisions, it's really different than it was 5 or 10 years ago. Most people are not going into Macy's or Sears or JCPenney anymore. They're buying online. So people purchase based on convenience and connection. So something convenient like Amazon, most of us make purchases from there. But if you really stop and think about it, something that you can get on Amazon, you will spend 2 or 3 times as much for the same exact product from a small business that you feel connected to, a business that shares your values. So whether it's women-led or sustainable business practices, fair pay, whatever that thing is that connects the business to you, you're more likely to purchase from them. So what comes back to brand advocacy is making sure that you're, clear on these values so you can connect with the right customers, but then also building that amazing experience so that they're not only purchasing from you again, because that's where the profit is when you have repeat customers, but so that they're talking about you. They're doing the marketing for you.
Right.
Word of mouth is not dead. We just do it online. We do it on social media. We do it by tagging a brand, when we wear a new item or something on Instagram, right? So it's by creating that connection and that experience so that your customers are actually advocating on your behalf.
I love that. And I've, again, never heard it said that way. And I just love the explanation of how you said it. And I say something similar of this brand advocacy thing is, it's almost like creating a movement that reflects your values and missions. Like sweatshirts that I sell, it has the statement of on brand, but what that means is so much bigger than a statement. And when I'm sharing that over and over and over again, then it's this conscious decision to make choices from an authentic place and in alignment with who you are. Hopefully that's what's catching on. And that's the reflection that people are feeling when they wear one of these products, but also when they're quote unquote wearing a service that I provide or wearing, a post that I put out. It's like when we can share these through our content and through, it doesn't have to be confusing. Like it doesn't have to be the on brand, like underground mission. We can come out and say these things. I think what you're saying is it's very, very powerful for creating, going back to that like trust and know factor and that loyalty factor of keeping people coming back time and time again, and also having them refer to other people and continuing the ripple effect.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly it.
Cool. Okay. So my last question for you is something I always like to ask, and the answers are always not what I expect. Was there ever a time, and I'll explain this a little bit further, was there ever a time where you were living off brand, and how did you navigate that and now live on brand? So what I mean by that was there a time where you weren't living in alignment with yourself, or you weren't listening to that intuition of yours? It could be something so simple as you were drinking Poland spring water when you really wanted to be drinking Fiji water, or it could be something a little bit bigger, but just go for it.
The thing that like immediately comes to mind for me is when I started the business, I was living off brand because I didn't know what the brand was yet.
Yeah.
I hadn't identified early stage startups as like the people that I wanted to work for. So I was offering this service and people were taking me up on it. Like it was working with clients, but it wasn't a good fit. And, maybe we would only work together for a couple of months, maybe not get a lot done because the way that I was showing up and the kind of work that I was trying to do wasn't in alignment with their business type or how they functioned. It took me about a year after starting my business, and honestly, it was kind of a fluke how I kind of found my way. But a couple months into starting my business, I had met a startup founder at a co-working space, and he asked me to run a market study for him, and it worked so well, he hired me for the marketing director role. And then a year after that, I had someone who had worked with my old boss who had come to me and said, we had a really bad experience working with him, but we remember you and we need someone to run our marketing. Would you be interested? And I kind of put two and two together, like I'm working with startup founders. And that's when I really found my path. So there was about a year there where I was taking different marketing jobs and doing different things, and it paid the bills, but it definitely wasn't on brand for me. And I had that aha moment where I realized this is where I belong. And I've been doing it ever since.
There you go. And sometimes it takes a little bit of that experimenting period to really figure it out. And you said something that's interesting that somebody else said on an interview recently. She's like, yeah, I was living off brand, but I didn't realize that that's what was going on. I feel like that was for you too, but glad you navigated your way through it and you're here today. So very last question. Do you have any last thoughts for us, or where can we find more of you? Where can people hang out with you? Tell us all the things.
Well, the best place to find me is on Instagram, Shauna.Armitage. And the best way to really learn and get connected is to listen to the Startup Renegades podcast. And you can find that at startuprenegades.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wisdom with us. This has been such informational and also inspirational, and we will chat with you soon.
Thanks.